As the film line goes here, there is the need for speed, and as the name suggests, really the main purpose of Hedera hashtag is to improve the speed of the basic Bitcoin blockchain. So the way this is done is that Hedera hashtag tries to take advantage of highly distributed networks of devices, and the aim is to accelerate the computational speed by propagating pieces of data, loosely referred to as gossip, in clusters instead of requiring synchronous consensus. So there is an analogy here between how rumours can spread via, say, Twitter or other social media, compared to how information can spread if it's just spread by central government, for instance. So as the name suggests, Hedera hashtag is intended to improve the speed, and theoretically this could yield 250,000 transactions per second. So this is orders of magnitude bigger than MasterCard, currently around 44,000 transactions per second, or PayPal, currently around 600 transactions per second. So theoretically this could be orders of magnitude on top of what is presently possible using present day systems, although this hasn't been practically realized yet. Okay, so it's kind of obvious because of how these things work that there might be a danger of excessive hype, and indeed there's a particular warning in Shria 2020 of something called the blockchain hype train. So we talked about the importance of the historical perspective in past lectures, and indeed this follows very similarly to past episodes of speculative bubbles that we've talked about. Remember, there's this brutal sort of house clearing operation at play, so often financial crashes and crises arise as a result of sorting out the truly profitable opportunities from the merely illusory ones. Okay, and this can occur even if there is a genuine technological innovation that is being made. There are also strong financial elements to the story. So there's always human stories within finance. It's not just numbers. Finance is fundamentally about people. There are also contemporary versions of the Henry Ford elevator boy story. So the idea is that Henry Ford goes to his apartment one day. He's advised by the elevator boy to buy certain stocks. Henry Ford goes into his apartment, is concerned that the elevator boy is pushing stocks, and calls his broker to sell his shares. And that occurs just before the 29 crash. So there are natural historical comparisons to be made between cryptocurrencies and blockchain and other episodes of financial history. So in some ways there's a lot of similarities between cryptocurrencies and blockchains and what has gone before, in terms of social factors, excessive speculation, and legally ambiguous trading. There are, however, I think some important differences. So special cases of cryptocurrencies and blockchain might include the extent of speculation and price volatility. So there are some similarities here between what's happened before in, say, the internet stocks bubble, although I think you could reasonably argue that the speculation and price volatility seen in contemporary cryptocurrency markets is more dramatic further still. Both cryptocurrencies and blockchain are fueled by unprecedented features of modern technology, so perhaps to a certain extent there are some things that need further special treatment. The open source software model that lies behind the blockchain developments may also play a particular role in encouraging excessive speculation, so I think it's arguably harder than in previous cases to separate Bitcoin and blockchain from speculation. So this blockchain hype train has strong historical precedents. So the adoption of new technology is often accompanied by an overemphasis on marketing and storytelling. Remember, there's always a human side to finance. So this is as true for blockchain as it was for other historical developments, things like the development of the railroad, the South Sea bubble, etc. So what you've got in each of these cases is excessive hype that accompanies periods of either genuine innovation or other genuinely profitable opportunities. Okay, so there's something there and some money to be made. People ultimately go too far. Now, one of the differences I think with Bitcoin and blockchain is some of this hype is necessary to enlist open source developers. So this is similar to, but I think arguably more extreme than the case with other historical innovations, and I think it's more difficult to separate Bitcoin and blockchain from excessive speculation compared to other past developments. This excessive hype can be dangerous, so perhaps over promotion of the field could negatively impact the credibility of future blockchain developments. There are also issues with respect to possible violation of securities laws and other potentially unethical behaviour. So there's always a human story behind finance. It's not just about numbers, and within this sort of social setting there is clear anecdotal evidence of excessive hype. The parties and promotional stunts associated with blockchain and the sort of rock and roll nature of blockchain industry events. So for instance, Snoop Dogg once headlined a Ripple party in New York, and it's a documented case here of a prominent Indonesian musician promoting a blockchain project to manage digital music royalties. Other events discussed in Shria 2020 have been described as being conducted in funky nightclub settings, and as a mathematician it's very rare that any of my lectures include the words rock and roll and funky. So the serious point here is that some of these anecdotes replicate other historical examples of excessive promotion. So things like Microsoft's construction of a $2 million alien spaceship as part of a gigantic promotion for an Xbox game. Okay, so these elements of excessive promotion occur time and time again. Okay, so look for anecdotes and the human story behind all this. It's not just a case of raw numbers. Clear historical parallels to draw upon here. So remember, there's always a human story behind finance. It's not just about numbers, and I think it's always worth paying attention to these, what I've called here, lower level social factors. Okay, all sort of contemporary versions of the Henry Ford elevator boy story, all giving you anecdotal evidence of excessive speculation and hype. So as part of this, a dizzying array of techniques have been used to promote cryptocurrencies. So things like information sessions, webinars, email lists, press release, actively managed chat groups on Telegram, WhatsApp, etc., and news interviews. So as I said before, it's very rare for me to be lecturing on a subject with potentially such huge popular interest, and as part of that I think it's inevitable that there will be some excessive hype. Okay, so finance is inherently quantitative, I think, if you want to understanding it at a deep level, but within that it's not just about numbers, and these lower level social factors are also at play, giving you, I think, pointers to the dangers of excessive hype. There's always a human story behind finance. It's not just about purely abstract numbers. So one key difference, I think, between Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and what's gone before is just the sheer level of speculation and volatility in these markets. Okay, so there are some historical parallels. For example, the internet bubble at the turn of the century. Okay, but whilst these share some similarities with cryptocurrencies, I think cryptocurrencies are probably much more extreme. Cryptocurrency prices can collapse completely, and that's been true even before Bitcoin got started. From a theoretical perspective, I think that cryptocurrencies are likely to house extreme bubble effects due to a lack of central regulation. So there's no equivalent of the Bank of England to second guess, and no equivalent of the Bank of England to dampen down bubbles once they occur. All these are also facilitated and exacerbated by modern technologies. Now there's a salutary lesson here in Reinhardt and Rogoff. So the analogy is that technology didn't make warfare obsolete, it just made it more deadly, and perhaps this is the same for financial crises. As evidence of the speculative fervour, the popular meme HODL was popularised by a speculator frantically proposing a buy and hold strategy in fervent anticipation of future price rises. Regulation is another important issue. International tax law regarding cryptocurrencies is ambiguous, and indeed legal issues are one of the easiest things for you to overlook when it comes to fintech. So the US takes the position that cryptocurrency token issuances are securities, but UK tax regulation is more nuanced. So according to Shreya 2020, regulators are less concerned with billionaires throwing money at cryptocurrencies than what is termed working poor leveraging credit cards to buy volatile securities that are manipulated and then crash. And I think there are clear analogies here to the popular fervour that accompanied things like the 1929 stock market bubble. Okay, so as one example of this, people I played football with have lost money betting on cryptocurrency markets. They never expressed a particular interest in financial markets when I was playing in the team. And again, I think there's sort of clear analogies to buying shares on the margin during the 1929 stock market bubble, and just the extent of the speculation, the fact it's sort of percolating through different layers of society and to people who wouldn't ordinarily take any interest in financial markets at all. Okay, so again, the human side of the story is very important here. Now, an enduring theme of this lecture is that I think it's very hard to separate Bitcoin and blockchain from this danger of excessive speculation. It's inevitable that blockchain is associated with open source software communities, and as part of that I think it's inevitable that you've got a certain amount of speculation. So the implication in Shreya 2020 is that blockchain's reliance upon open source communities may play an integral role in generating excessive speculation, and we've seen aspects of this in relation to earlier parts of this module. So open source initiatives are a clever way to get thousands or millions of developers to build on top of existing code, and indeed the R program that we introduced in the first 3 lectures is an example of freeware software. So the idea is that the ecosystem evolution innovation from thousands of individual contributors will ultimately lead to the solution of complex computational problems in a way that you, for instance, have to keep downloading updates for Microsoft, a company that follows a different software model. So I think there's an intrinsic danger that you need some amount of excessive hype in order to secure enough individual open source contributors to things like the blockchain. So why open source? So open source software is important for development of the blockchain, both in terms of the ideology and the culture of open source software. Beyond that, open source software initiatives should ultimately guarantee innovation. So we saw in the early part of the module examples of the R code and R packages that are available for free, that can just be downloaded off the web, don't have to pay anything, and stable code as well. So note the problems with Microsoft and all the updates, the software that you have to download periodically. Saw in earlier lectures that freeware such as R is often better and easier to use than commercial alternatives such as SAS, and things like the regular Microsoft updates are again indicative of the failure of other types of approaches that don't follow this open software approach. Okay, so there are important elements here, I think, in terms of the ideology behind blockchain and the ideology behind open source software initiatives. Okay, but the point with such initiatives is that if you follow this open source model, you should hopefully be able to guarantee innovation from multiple individual contributors combined, and also more stable code.